All right, let's get right into it. If you're someone who is always asking why, you've probably been called difficult at some point. Maybe you've been told you have a problem with authority. But what if that's not a flaw? What if that constant need to question things is actually a sign of a really powerful cognitive style? Well, that's what we're digging into today.
Does this hit home for you? The idea of just taking something at face value. It just doesn't work for you. You absolutely need the logic, the reason, the justification behind any rule or request. It feels like your brain is literally wired to demand that why before you can even think about getting on board.
And this is the key. That impulse, it's not about being stubborn. It's actually a pretty sophisticated form of independent cognitive processing. It means you're actively wrestling with information, not just passively accepting it. And believe it or not, this personality trait actually has a name.
So let's put a framework around this whole thing. Best-selling author Gretchen Rubin, she studied human nature and found that people tend to respond to expectations in 4 pretty distinct ways. And if you're one of those people who always needs reasons, you almost certainly fall into one specific category.
Say hello to the questioner. What Rubin found is that questioners are driven by sound reasoning, logic, and a deep sense of fairness. They trust their own judgment above all else. So yeah, they'll happily hit a deadline or follow a rule, but only if it makes sense to them. If they think something is arbitrary or just plain inefficient, they're going to push back.
And you can see here how the questioner fits into the bigger picture. Rubin identified 3 other types. You've got upholders, who are great with both their own expectations and what others expect. Then there are obligers, who meet external expectations but really struggle with their own. And finally, rebels, who, well, they resist all expectations. The questioner carves out this really unique space. Their own internal rules are everything. Anything from the outside has to be vetted and turned into an internal rule first.
And if this is you, you are definitely not alone. Rubin's research suggests that almost a quarter of the entire population identifies as a questioner. That's a huge group of people all wired to be motivated by one thing: good reasons.
Okay, so we know what this tendency is called, but let's talk about why it feels so urgent. That drive to ask why is rooted deep in our brain science. It's not some personality quirk. It's a fundamental engine that makes our minds work.
So, a psychologist named George Lowenstein came up with what's called the information gap theory, and it's brilliant. He basically argued that curiosity feels like a kind of cognitive hummer. When your brain notices a gap between what you know and what you want to know, it creates this intense drive to fill that gap, the same way being hungry drives you to find food.
And this chart just shows it perfectly. There's a total sweet spot for curiosity. Think about it. When we know nothing about a topic, we're not really curious. And when we think we know everything, also not curious. Our curiosity absolutely peaks right in the middle, when we know just enough to realize all the things we don't know. That's the information gap that our brain just becomes obsessed with closing.
And here's the best part: the payoff. Brain scan studies show that when you finally get the answer you were looking for, it lights up the exact same dopamine reward pathways that are triggered by things like eating delicious food or getting money. Finding out why literally feels good, and there's a scientific reason for it.
But here's where it gets complicated. This really powerful drive to question everything can go in 2 very, very different directions. There's a fine line between using your questions to find the truth and using them just to reinforce what you already believe.
You know, the difference really just comes down to your motivation. A healthy skeptic asks questions because they want to understand. They are genuinely searching for the best possible answer, and they're willing to change their mind if you show them better evidence. A cynic, on the other hand, asks questions to attack an idea. They usually start from a place of mistrust, assuming the worst, and they're just hunting for evidence that confirms what they've already decided is true.
So, this right here, this is the ultimate test. It's the question that separates the two. A true skeptic can actually answer this question. They have a standard of proof that, if it's met, would make them change their mind. A cynic or a denier, they often can't answer it. Because deep down, no amount of evidence is ever going to be good enough to shake their core belief.
So we've seen the good and the, well, not so good. But what happens when this questioning impulse goes way, way too far? Let's take a look at its most extreme and debilitating form.
This is known in the clinical world as pathological doubt. It's a form of OCD where the mind gets completely stuck on a question, like, am I in the right career?
Do I really love my partner? Am I a good person? And it becomes totally unable to accept any answer as final. It's a terrible trap. And it works like this devastating loop. First, a question just pops into your head and it triggers a wave of fear. So you try to reason your way to some kind of definitive answer to make the fear go away. But the second you land on an answer, your mind goes, but what if? And immediately creates a new doubt. And boom, you're right back where you started, only now you're even more anxious. And here is the gut-wrenching paradox that keeps people stuck in this cycle. They believe the solution is to just think harder, to reason more clearly, to finally find that one perfect, airtight answer that will kill the doubt for good. But in reality, the obsessive search itself is the very thing that's fueling the entire problem.
I love this next idea. It's a powerful metaphor for the way out. Imagine you've dropped a ring in a muddy pond. If you keep frantically stirring up the water trying to find it, you'll only make the water murkier and you'll never see the bottom. The only way you'll ever find that ring is to stop, be still, and wait for the sand to settle. The answer appears not because you tried harder, but because you stopped struggling.
Okay, so let's tie all of these threads together. This drive to question everything is an incredibly powerful tool, but like any tool, how you use it is what really matters. Understanding your own style is absolutely the key to using it well.
This table really just lays it all out. Look, the healthy skeptic is driven by a desire to learn, and the result is growth. The cynic is driven by an emotional need to be right, and the result is just stalemate and mistrust. And with pathological doubt, the driver is fear, and it leads to total paralysis. It's the same cognitive tool, questioning, but the motivation behind it creates a wildly different result. At the end of the day, being a questioner is a real strength. It drives innovation, it prevents huge mistakes, and it helps us find the truth. The trick is to point that incredible cognitive engine of yours toward understanding, not just toward proving a point or running from fear. So, knowing all this, what are you going to ask next?